Hello, everyone, and welcome to our next session. In this session, we're going to be talking about how people managers can empower and grow diverse teams. And I'm here with Guerra from tEQuitable. We're going to be having a fun conversation. Just a lot around curiosity and consistency. And we're both excited to dive into this. Just to give you a little bit of background on me, I'm the head of sales at Pando. And my experience with this has been as a woman of color coming up in a predominantly male-dominated space. I was introduced very early on in my career to opportunities to really advocate for the way that I worked best and I could achieve the best results. And it led me on a journey to really wanting to help other people do the same thing. So I became a certified coach in order to empower people to understand how they can best grow within their organization, and have worked with a lot of leaders, teams, founders on how to support this specific initiative. So I will send it over to Will so Will can do a quick introduction on himself.
Thanks, Misha, and it's really great to be here today with you. So a little bit about my background and what I do. I have had the privilege of being a manager of people pretty much my entire career. My first 18 years were in marketing, specifically in the fashion retail space. I then found my way into management consulting, where I got to work on some pretty significant cultural transformation work with large organizations. And it is actually there where I found my passion for diversity, equity, and inclusion. I always say that it was a profound, both professional and personal kind of like moment for me. Because from a personal standpoint, I'm born and raised in New York City, Ecuadorian immigrant parents, brown gay person. It just gave me language to finally understand all the experiences that I had had in my life. And of course, from a professional perspective, it helped me lean even more to be a better people manager. And of course, all those things helped me end up where I am today at tEQuitable. So at tEQuitable, we partner with organizations to provide a confidential sounding board for employees where they can come and figure out workplace conflict. And in turn, we collect data that we aggregate and anonymize, and we use that to identify systemic issues within an organization's culture. My team is in charge of analyzing that data and providing insights back to an organization with actionable recommendations based on the themes that we're seeing, but also keeping in mind the size of their organization, their industry, and so on. The idea is to help organizations create a more equitable workplace that's going to work for everyone.
That's amazing. I'm very excited to dive into this, to get into the meaty part of this. I think every time we talk about diversity, equity, and inclusion within our organizations, I think it's always helpful for us to frame the diversity piece, because we're all coming from different contexts, different experiences. As our keynote earlier said, we all have different privileges that we're aware of, we're not aware of, biases that we're aware of, we're not aware of. So I'd love to kick this off with just framing for our audience. When we're talking about diversity, what are we talking about?
No, that's great. I'll start with what we all know to be true, right? A diverse team is a group of individuals who have different backgrounds and skills that together work to achieve common goals. They might have differences regarding age, nationality, ethnicity, education, professional background, skills, and of course, different ways of thinking. And we've all seen the data that shows that having a diverse team made up of humans with different backgrounds and skills can outperform less diverse groups by over 30%. Diverse teams have the ability to increase creativity and innovation. They are better at problem solving and decision making. Individuals can also develop and expand their own existing skill sets by working in a diverse environment. all of which points to increased engagement and reduction in turnover.
Mm-hmm.
So this is where leaders need to make sure that everyone feels that they have a voice and contribute to the work. Right?
Yeah.
Creating space for everyone to feel included no matter what their role is. So I mean, essentially what we're talking about is inclusion.
Yes, yes, I could not agree with you more. I think it's interesting diving into that piece, because when we think about diverse teams, we think about diverse cultures. I think there's this duality that we have to consider for leaders, and that duality is there's us actually doing things. So a lot of companies have done things, they're saying they're supporting this, they're, putting money in this area or that area. So there's a lot of doing that happens, but I think we actually have to start with the being side of things and really focus on what are our intentions? Like how do we need to show up as leaders, as an organization, in order to actually support and build these diverse teams? Because we may be doing the thing of hiring all of these people and creating a diverse workforce, but if the intention behind that is purely so that numbers look good, or we're able to hire so that our customers are happy, then if we're not coming from the right intention, and the execution, the doing part is not going to land well. So in that, what do you think are some of the things that inclusive leaders should be thinking about right now?
Yeah, so stats show that what a leader says and does makes up to a 70% difference as to whether an employee will report feeling included.
Mm,
It's important because the more people feel included, the more they will share ideas, go the extra mile, collaborate,
mm,
all of which improves organizational performance, right? Like that's a given.
yeah.
But what leaders should be thinking about and asking themselves is, well, first and foremost, how am I contributing to an inclusive environment, right?
Mm-hmm.
Am I listening and valuing all contributions equally? Am I allowing people to be their authentic selves?
Mm-hmm.
Have I created an environment where people feel safe speaking up or have dissenting views?
Mm,
And the one important one for me is, have I allowed myself to show up vulnerable in front of my team and share my own moments of growth? You know,
mm-hmm.
creating a space of authenticity and learning. As we all know, and you said it yourself, building a diverse team is just the first step, right?
Mm-hmm.
But nurturing a diverse team is where the work is, but also where the magic happens.
Yeah. Yeah, it's so true. Having done work with individuals who are on teams where they feel like they're a number. So you've brought this person in, and now the energy that they're feeling at the company is, I'm the diversity hire. I'm the number. I was not brought in to this so that, I could drive success or reach my potential or any of those things. And what I've often heard is, my leader just, they aren't quite sure how to actually help me get from point A to point B. They know how they got from point A to point B, but they aren't really sure how to help me get there, which is very, very different, right? And something I think we talk a lot about with our clients at Pando, because I think there are a couple of different scenarios where this happens. I think this happens a lot when really great ICs get pushed into management and they actually don't want to be managers, which is like, I think 60% of the population wants to stay in IC and, drive their value to the business that way. But then for the management side, managers they don't have the support and understanding of, okay, in this role, it's not only you are great at the actual functional aspects of the role, it's now, okay, how do you support and enable and grow individuals? And so in that, I think it forces us to take a look at ourselves and kind of identify what's happening with us that could be a blocker. So I'm curious, like, what are some of the internal blockers that that you think managers come up against that help them, or that um, that encourage this, this kind of stuck feeling for their employees?
Yeah, no, that's great. And I agree with you that a lot of folks that are really great at what they do, right, the skill set, they get promoted into these positions when then, they want to do right by now the people that they're managing, but they haven't been given the tools and the well, let's just call it the toolkits in order to be good managers, right? Unleash all those things. I
Mm-hmm.
think for me, the main blocker, I really think it's about humility.
Mm,
Managers get stuck on feeling like they need to have all the answers.
mm,
An inclusive leader understands that having a humble approach opens you up to challenging your personal assumptions, adopting a learning orientation,
mm-hmm.
being open to receiving feedback from others,
Yeah.
right? So inclusive leaders, they ask questions before asserting their own opinion. They are comfortable not always being right and open to learning from others.
Mm-hmm.
Also, they're actively curious about the people they lead. And
Mm-hmm.
I think this is really important because not only does curiosity help you learn about your people, but it helps you become a more approachable leader.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, the result is that your team feels safe offering their point of view and therefore creating a more collaborative environment. I have to say, our CEO at tEQuitable is a really great example of being an inclusive leader.
Mm-hmm.
Never making assumptions and always asking questions. They admit to not always having the answer, but that
Mm-hmm.
together we're going to learn and figure it out.
Right.
And that no idea is a bad idea. And and don't get me wrong, this style can be intimidating at first if you're not used to it. But
Mm-hmm.
quickly you learn that they're just being curious and always on a journey of learning. And
Right.
what happens is it makes everyone feel like their opinion matters.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's huge. I think that, to your point, like, too often we get into these positions, and um, the term leader is an interesting term, because from my perspective, anybody, regardless of like the level that you're at within the organization, you can embody leadership and show up as a leader. And I think that leaders have been so closely associated or defined with management, C-level executives, and everything has to come from the top down. Whereas there are beautiful ideas from the bottom up, the sides. We need the team to get together. We need everybody to work together in order to drive the company forward. And so
That's
I
right.
love love that point.
Yeah, and like ICs can be incredible leaders, right?
Oh
To
yeah.
your point, it's not someone that just has to manage people.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. We want ICs should all be leaders in some
Right.
way, shape, or form. Yes, absolutely.
That's right.
And you don't have to be like a super senior IC either. You can be a more junior IC, and leading and mentoring and providing ideas to leadership. I think it's really or to the executive team. I think it's really important. Um, with with that and kind of the team unity, I think we're still kind of on this being side of things. How have you seen people teams be successful with really enabling, embodying, supporting, empowering inclusive leadership as a culture within the organization?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think it is about building organizational trust and psychological safety.
Yeah.
So, building a culture of trust can be a powerful way to improve performance.
Mm,
Neuroscientific research actually shows that trust reduces social frictions and promotes cooperative behavior among colleagues.
yeah.
So, to me, a few things that people teams should think about is, well, creating a culture of communication, right?
Mm,
One way to do this is by making feedback the norm in your culture.
yeah.
You can do this by adopting a company wide feedback model, choosing the right framework that suits your organization can help normalize how feedback is given and received.
Mhm.
Also providing a framework for one-on-ones, right, which include room for two-way feedback,
Mhm.
encouraging leaders and managers to ask feedback about themselves.
Yeah.
And from a psychological safety standpoint, implementing a neutral and informal resource like tEQuitable, where
Mhm.
employees can confidentially figure out workplace conflict, right? Because employees don't want to lose agency before they're ready.
Right.
To give you some stats, as few as 6% of individuals harassed at work reported to HR, but
Mhm.
22% of employees have visited the tEQuitable platform for help. We
Mhm.
are collecting data and insights that HR has never had access to before. So
Mhm.
we help people teams get ahead of issues before they escalate.
Mm. Why do you think that is? The stat about the 6% stat. I think it's so interesting. And I've experienced it myself where somebody might come to me and say, this thing happened, but I'm not going to go to HR. I've had things happen, especially very early in my career, where I didn't go to HR. So, what are some of the reasons that you're seeing, or that y'all feel is the reason why people don't go to HR more?
Yeah, because as I said, people want to have agency as much as possible, right? And they fear that by going to their manager, going to HR, it can quickly go from an informal conversation to a very formal process. As
Mm-hmm.
we know, there are policies in place in organizations where, if a manager, whether the person reports to them or not, hears something, they're put on notice.
Right.
So people are afraid. They're afraid that, I still don't know, is this a thing or not? Like, how can I figure out whether I should be going to HR and making something formal? I just want a sounding board, right,
Mhm.
before I go there.
Yeah.
People are also afraid of retaliation, right?
Mm-hmm.
Again, I know that all or many organizations have policies around retaliation, but
Mm-hmm.
there is still that fear that once it kind of leaves a person's hands, if you will, they no longer have control, and then that they're afraid.
Mm-hmm.
They get fearful.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I'm sure a large majority of people that are on this call right now have experienced that fear of, should I talk about this? Should I report this? Or, like, is it that bad? It's interesting. I watched there's a documentary on Netflix, on Abercrombie and Fitch. I don't know if you've seen it yet, but it's on their workforce and their culture and why they kind of went into a dark place.
Wow.
And there was a Black woman, an employee, and she's on the documentary, and she said things were happening to her, but in her mind, she's like, is it that bad? I have this job. Is it that bad? Is it worth me bringing this up? Is it worth me talking about it? And in the end, she was a part of the group that, spoke up against a lot of the very negative things that were happening and the discrimination that was happening internally. So she did speak up against it, but for a very long time, she dealt with things that were very uncomfortable,
Right.
to your point. So yeah, it's
And all those things accumulate, right? It's
yeah.
like death by a thousand paper cuts.
Mhm.
So it's like, so how do you help people get in front of it, and provide them these safe spaces, safe places to figure out how to work things through, right?
Mhm.
And ultimately, it is that a person will end up going to HR,
Right.
but giving them a safe place where they can figure that out and what framework to use before going
Mhm. Yeah, yeah. And sometimes it is that gut check that we can use our, like, counterparts or other employees for, like, hey, you were in that meeting. Did this sound that bad?
there, right?
So it's great to have an external source for that as well.
And as humans, we can often get in our own heads, right? Like
Mhm. Yeah.
sometimes by having that neutral sounding board, it can help you kind of reframe what's been kind of playing in your head over and over again, and hopefully get you to a positive solution.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Um, So I'd love to switch things to more of the doing side, which is what I think we talk about a lot, but still there are challenges with the execution. I think a lot of companies have put a lot of things in place, especially with social injustices and just lots of different things that have been brought to light on the diversity, equity, and inclusion side. Um, I'm I'm curious how um, how have you seen managers create the psychological safety that's needed with the new world that we're in? So this hybrid remote workforce that we're all in, it's more difficult. So how are you seeing people, create that safety?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. So it's really by taking an equitable approach, right? Remote team members can then feel a sense of fairness and inclusion that will positively impact their performance and productivity. So
Mm-hmm.
managers should be, ensuring that everyone can be an active participant. So
Mm-hmm.
that means, something small like figuring out the best way to share knowledge to avoid information gaps. Are meeting times happening when everyone can attend? Right? Then thinking through how you're assigning work. Are you assigning work equitably? And
Mm-hmm.
also being mindful of proximity bias, right?
Mm-hmm.
Creating opportunities for authentic human connection, especially in our hybrid world today.
Mm-hmm.
Encouraging folks to develop interpersonal relationships.
Mm-hmm.
And then fostering peer acknowledgement, right? Creating space for team members to celebrate each other and the work.
Mm-hmm.
I think some of these strategies help create a cohesive foundation so
Mm-hmm.
team members can adapt and grow together. I
Yeah.
think when done collectively, these strategies can help sustain a culture of vibrant conversations, team curiosity, increased creativity, trust, which is
Yeah.
really important, and honest, healthy conflict. All
Mhm.
qualities of a strong hybrid team that reflects a positive work culture.
Yeah. Yeah, and these things are hard because we're not taught how to do these. We're not taught how to do them in our personal lives. If you think even about the point that you just made about healthy conflict, a lot of us aren't we're not taught that in school. So even in our personal relationships, we don't quite know how to approach that. So at work, it can feel even more daunting or difficult, just to manage that. The other thing you brought up that's interesting that I was hoping you could dive into just a little bit more is proximity bias. I'm not sure if everybody's familiar with the concept.
No, that's great. So we live in hybrid worlds today, right? And that could mean geographically, time zones, or it could just be that a certain number of folks are working from home, and then maybe they rotate, and some folks are working in the office. And as
Mm-hmm.
a manager, you just need to make sure that and again, to the point of consistency and equitable processes, how are you creating things that where everyone is being treated the same and having the same access to everything, right?
Mm-hmm.
Whether someone is sitting right outside your office or in your next cubicle, or they're on a screen during a Zoom meeting. And
Mm-hmm.
that's what proximity bias is, that sometimes you want to go to the person that's literally right next to you to
Right.
either give them an assignment or talk through something.
Mm-hmm.
It's not to say that you shouldn't have water cooler moments,
Right.
but I think when it's important team things, you should make a list and make sure that you talk about them or talk about potential work that's coming down the pike in the group meeting, right? Where folks are on Zoom and folks may be in a conference room next to you.
Yeah. Yeah. I heard about this. Someone actually brought this to me, and it wasn't something that I actually thought about. So I'm a morning person. I can admit that all day. I've been a morning person since I was a child. I was that kid who was up like 2 hours before school, like having my like cereal and watching my cartoons so I had enough time to like get ready for the day. I am not a night person at
Right.
all. Like by the end of the day, I'm depleted. Like I've got to, relax, wind down, all of that. And so someone I was connecting with, people were having meetings at night and they were a morning person and they kept making decisions at night in these impromptu, hey, can you hop on real quick? I have a question about this, and kept making decisions. And this other person felt slighted and not included.
That's right.
And it wasn't intentional. The people weren't, intentionally trying to push this person out of the decisions, but it was happening. And so just creating the awareness that they wanted to be involved, and could they set these conversations up at a time when they could all join together, was something that this person had to reach out and do, and just create that awareness.
No, I think that's right. And to me, like, that's why rituals are really important, right? So if you're kicking off a project with new people, let's say, it's always great to kind of go round robin and learn about each other. Like, are
Mm-hmm.
you a morning person? Are you a night owl?
Yeah.
When do you do your best work? What kind of things do you need through the course of the day in order to stay productive, right? Like, someone may need to go to that yoga class at noon, and that's okay. I may
Mm-hmm.
need to go on an hour walk in the afternoon with my dog because it
Yeah.
just helps me decompress.
Yeah.
But learning those things about each other and your team members then help you get to, okay, we can't have a 7 p.m. meeting, but we can have a 4 p.m. meeting and everyone will be able to participate.
Right. Yeah, I love it. I love it. We did that. We had that icebreaker internally at Pando, and it's really powerful. Everybody has like their meeting hours set, and we all are very good about abiding by those. So yeah, it's really powerful. Um, what are some of the most impactful actions that leaders can take to empower individuals that just look and think differently than they do?
Yeah, great question. I think it is about approaching things from a learning mindset, right? Not blame, and having great patience. We all come to the table with different experiences, skills, and ways of thinking. So it's about being open to learning from others that don't think like. It's
Mm-hmm.
amazing to see great ideas come from everyone on the team, regardless of their role.
Yeah.
Because the great idea or perspective, as you know, can come from anywhere.
Yeah.
Leaders should be curious about their people and their ideas. Ask questions if you don't understand an idea right away. But
Mm-hmm.
of course, making sure that it's from a place of curiosity and not judgment, because that
Right.
can also go sideways.
Huge.
Make sure everyone has an opportunity to contribute. You'll be surprised that a great idea or thought can come from the quietest person on the team. But it's
Mm-hmm.
giving that time and that space for people to process in their own way and then be able to contribute. That to me is where the patience comes in.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, and then, one thing that I've done pretty much my entire career is building retrospectives into your sprints or milestones, right?
Yeah.
Always with the mindset of what have we learned and what can we do better?
Mm-hmm.
This creates a growth mindset for everyone.
Yeah.
At tEQuitable, we're always asking questions in order to learn from each other. So I
Mm-hmm.
always like to tell new folks, no one is questioning smarts, right? Like,
Right.
we wouldn't be here otherwise.
Right.
It's about curiosity and getting to the logic in order to understand where we're all coming from.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And something that you hit on that is so, so vital is the judgment piece. Like we see this show up far too often where people are like, I'm being curious. I'm asking the question, but it's like your tone said a whole lot of judgment in it. So,
That's
right, whether it's written tone, whether it's verbal tone, body language, you were speaking judgment. And I think when that comes up, I've had to coach a lot of people around how to deal with that. Like, not only being the person who's putting that forward, but also on the receiving end, how do I cut that off and say, this isn't about me, this is about them, and the way that they're showing up. Because I think often when things are covered in judgment, it speaks more to the other person and the way that they may show up or think about themselves or how they talk to themselves, or there's some internal things that are often going on there when it doesn't come from that true, more virtuous place of curiosity as opposed to
Exactly.
judgment.
That's exactly right, and it's all about curiosity, right? It's like
Yeah.
if you've built this diverse team of, with different backgrounds, different ways of thinking, because you want to have the best output. So
Hmm.
that means leaning in, giving space, and actually listening to everyone,
Hmm.
because you never know where those nuggets are going to come from.
Right. Right. Yeah, absolutely. Um, and I think one of the most difficult things that teams are struggling with right now is, so I bring together this really beautiful, diverse group of people, and I have this fantastic team. I've been very thoughtful about who I've hired and what they'll contribute. How do I get that diverse team to work together cohesively and build on each other's strengths and help to elevate each other and empower each other in areas where, certain people may not be as strong or have grown as much in certain areas? So I'm curious what your thoughts are on that piece and how teams can empower that.
Yeah, I think I mentioned it a little bit earlier before, but it's about encouraging people to build one-on-one relationships with each other. I think
Yeah.
that's really, really important.
Yeah.
By getting to know each other better, you develop trust, and trust is key to working as a cohesive team that leans on each other's strengths and delivers positive outcomes.
Hmm.
Another thing managers can do is create an environment where people build on each other, right? It is less about who has the best idea, but more about how, as a team, can we take something and blossom it to even a greater idea.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yes. I love that term, blossoming. Just the visual in it. Just the visual in it. Um, this has been fantastic. I think we have a couple of questions, so I want to leave us some time and just make sure that we're able to jump into these. Um, so we have a question. What would you guide a manager that struggles to balance between getting short-term results and allocating the time and resources to nurture a diverse team?
That is a great question. So, especially in our world today of hybrid, right? And hopefully the flexibility that comes from that, it's about just focusing on outcomes, right?
Mm-hmm.
Not what, where, when. So when you have short-term results that a team has to deliver on, it's being open about that, saying like, okay, here are the things that we need to deliver in a week, deliver in 2 weeks, deliver in a month. It's time. What are people's strengths? What are people? Where do people want to lean in order for us as a team to get there? But
Mm-hmm.
it's being open from a communications perspective of what the team needs to deliver on,
Mm-hmm.
so that together as a team, everyone's like, okay, I get it. We need to move really, really fast in order to deliver this thing, but we're
Right.
going to do it together, and we're going to make sure that we're leaning on each other's strengths
Mm-hmm.
in order for this outcome to happen. And that's how you can continue to nurture these diverse teams, right? Because you're bringing them collectively together and say, all right, it's kind of go time and we have this fast sprint, but
Mm-hmm.
we know that we can do it together. So how can we divide and conquer and deliver?
Yeah, I love that. And I think also to your point earlier about having the retro and having them consistently and saying, okay, let's bring everyone together. How did we leverage everyone to their fullest ability? Do you feel like you could have done more or could have contributed in another way that would have assisted us in getting from point A to point B faster, better, whatever it might be? So I think to your point earlier, having those retros is important so that next round, next key result that you have to get to over a 2 week period, you can incorporate those learnings iteratively.
Yeah, and the one thing that I would add to that though is, it doesn't matter what branch of the team, what person maybe didn't do the thing, right?
Mhm.
It's about as a team, how do we learn and how do then are we better next time? Because
Exactly.
what we want to stay away from is blaming, right?
Right.
Not about blaming, it's about learning. Nobody
Right.
at the end of the day wants to do a bad job. but we
Exactly.
all make mistakes, right?
Oh,
And we learn from them
of course. Every day. Every
every day,
second.
every hour.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. And that's, I mean, that's what we're supposed to be doing. I think I have a 7-month-old, and watching her just do things over and over and over, it's really refreshing for me, because it reminds me, like, this is what you're supposed to fall or try to put that block in that wrong hole 25, 30, 40, 50 times and get frustrated and then do it again tomorrow. Like,
Right.
that's being human. So we have another question here. It says, let's say there's an incident where someone comes across as judgmental and biased. How would the team recover from that?
That's a great one. It's again, so we're not perfect, right? Like everything we've talked about today is what managers, what leaders should have top of mind at all times when working with their teams, working through things, those short-term sprints. So we're going to make mistakes,
Yeah.
but it's about that humility piece of hopefully recognizing what just happened and coming back to the team, coming back to an individual, if it's with one person, and saying, I messed up, or I did not handle this the right way. And I want us to redo that. Right.
Mm-hmm.
So acknowledgement, right? Like, it's again, we're not perfect. And showing up like you too are growing as a leader
Mm-hmm.
truly does help the dynamic of a team, because
Mm-hmm.
they see their leader be vulnerable, then they feel safe to be vulnerable as well.
Mm-hmm.
So that's a great way to recover, is just to acknowledge what has happened and how you want to help the team move forward.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. And I think the vulnerability is something that is not a one-time thing. It's not something that you show
Right.
up and you do the one time. It's something that you
That's
have to
right.
consistently show over and over and over again to really build that trust, like in any relationship. Um, I can't believe we're at the end of time here. This went by so fast.
It really did.
Thank you so much, Will. It's been great connecting with you on this topic. If anybody is curious about tEQuitable and the work that you all are doing, where do they find you?
Yes. So we are tequitable.com, TEQUITABLE.
Great.
Or you can also just email sales@tequitable.com.
Fantastic. Great. Thank you again. And thank you to everybody who joined us and contributed to the conversation. Up next in 10 minutes, we have a Pando Spotlight. So we'll have our head of customer success, Adam, will be walking us through how to have structured career conversations in the Pando product. So we'll see you all in about 10 minutes. Thanks,
Thank you.
everyone. Bye now.